I've been keeping track of the viewing numbers for every major CSGO has had since they started in 2013, and 2019's Berlin Starladder major has been the least watched major since 2014. There's no other way to put it. It was not as viewed as the ones before it. The averages of the peak viewing figures for every stage are down to the lowest levels we've seen since 2014, and it's not as though the recent view have been that impressive. At least, this is according to the figures that I used, collected from the viewer numbers shown next to every match in CSGO's match archive. Esport charts reach the same conclusion, only with slightly different numbers. I do like the way they record the matches. They don't just go by the numbers stated on the official demo recording, they actively track the viewing numbers throughout the matches, which means they can attain more exact information, though it's still coming from the same traffic sources. Compared with the previous major, they show that peak viewership dropped by 30%, hours watched is down by 14%, and average viewership is down by 10%. So it's not like this major was an absolute disaster, but it is still down on the last major, which itself wasn't exactly a runaway success. As somebody involved with CSGO, I always like to see the majors performing well, so I'm not happy to see viewing figures drop like this. But it's important to remain objective. They have dropped, but it's not proof that CSGO is dying or anything like that. But at the same time, I don't want to be one of those people in denial who thinks there could have been a popular Russian stream or TV broadcast somewhere that wasn't counted, and that if it was, the numbers would have been different. I'm not saying that isn't a possibility, but if that's the case, then what are the real numbers? Problem with assumptions is that you can't exactly quantify them. Plus, who's to say that the past majors didn't also have this sort of unaccounted stuff? As far as I'm concerned, we can only go with the numbers that we're given. Now, let's investigate why the viewers could have dropped. There was the usual talk about it being poorly planned, about there being delays, bad observing early on, and so on. This may have contributed to it, but I'm kind of used to this sort of stuff being said about a major. I definitely remember this being said about the London one last year as well. In Starladder's defence, these sorts of criticisms have died down as this major has progressed, so I think they learned from their mistakes, and that the tournament ended stronger than it started. Plus, they got sliggy to observe towards the end. Valve has made it increasingly easy to watch these majors. There's now a page where you can keep track of upcoming tournaments, and during the major, whenever you load the game up, you would be treated to a live stream of any matches being played. It sounds like a great way to boost viewing numbers, and I'm sure there are many benefits to this approach, like higher watch time and you being able to follow the stories of your favourite teams from start to finish, but it comes at a cost. I personally feel burnt out by the time the quarterfinals begin because of how many days of broadcast matches there have been leading up to that point. Don't get me wrong, it's important for the teams involved to have several chances of proving their worth in the lower stages, but for the viewers, it is a hell of a lot of Counter-Strike to watch. It's not like you're being forced to watch it all, but I generally feel worn down by the time the quarterfinals begin, as opposed to starting from there and watching the rest with fresh eyes. Speaking of burnout, there used to be 3 majors a year, but after Cluj-Napoca's in 2015 and its lower viewing figures, I wonder if they reduced this to 2 to try and make each more meaningful and worth watching, with more time between each to give everybody a chance to recover. With hindsight, maybe Cluj-Napoca's lower viewing figures weren't from viewer burnout, but instead was just from the summer curse that has terrorised the last major of the year ever since. Majors around this time of year have always been the poorest performer. Your guess for why is as good as mine. Maybe because people have other things to do when the weather's better. But this summer curse could have contributed to Starladder's reduced viewing figures. And as for the matches themselves, they were mostly one-sided. Just one of the games in the arena reached the 3rd map of a best of 3, and that was in the quarterfinals. That's joint worst with London last year and with Columbus in 2016. All other majors have had at least one match in the semis or the final that has reached a 3rd map. This gives the viewing numbers time to grow, plus everybody loves a close game that reaches a 3rd and final deciding map. I've talked about the impact this has in previous videos. If the grand final reaches the 3rd and final map, then that is always the most popular. So I'm confident the peak viewership for this tournament would have increased had some of the last matches gone onto the final map. It would also have considerably upped the average viewership and watch time. As with the last major, I blame Australis for all of this because they're too damn good. It's shocking how one-sided a lot of the grand finals in the majors have been. This time, the other team only won 11 rounds against Australis, making this the most one-sided grand final ever. I've compared this Berlin major to the Katowice one earlier this year, but perhaps I should be comparing it to the London major from last year instead. They're both victims of the summer curse after all, but Berlin still fared worse. This could in part be due to how drops work. Before the game went free to play last December, you got drops randomly by spectating the matches. So for the London major last year, some people would have just left several computers idling, inflating the viewing figures for that major beyond the number of people actually watching them. But since the game went free to play last December, Valve has rolled out a pass that you have to pay for, which grants you a set number of drops depending on the things you do. It still involves watching the games, but less so than it did before. So while a drop in viewing figures may look like a bad thing, you should also understand that maybe it's better for it to actually be from people wanting to watch the matches, instead of from idling computers for people who simply want the drops. I don't know how much this has changed things, but it's worth bearing in mind. I like to end on a positive, and there is one. For while viewership of majors may be down, CSGO's player base has risen a lot this year. It's in a very strong position now, with a higher average number of players than it has ever seen before. I'm sure the game going free to play will have helped with this, but I also think it shows the state of other games. In the past, when another game is popular, it often takes a portion of CSGO's fanbase for a while, but they always come back eventually. I think CSGO deserves some credit for still being so strong, so many years after release. As a game, CSGO is still an important title, and now the major's over, we might get some new and exciting updates.